Good day, my friends. I've had an interesting few days here. Uh, I'd ask the Lord to give me a message that might impact the most people toward His desires. What could be said that would impact the most people? And here's the word that came to me: from sin to sanctification to eternal salvation with God. So many people are unaware of God. So if you don't know God, how can you know what sin is? If you can't know God, how can you know basically anything? Because God is the one who formed all things on heaven and earth and put things into motion. But if you do not know God, there's no urgency to conform to anything such as the law of God, His precepts, His commandments. Where there is no knowledge of a law, then how is there an infraction of something that you don't know about? Now, when this message originally came to me, I didn't feel I was qualified enough to speak such a message because it theologically, I guess, gets a bit deep. But since I asked for the message and He gave it to me, I guess I'm the one who He intends to make it known. God tells us as His children to ask, to come to Him and bring all our requests to Him. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock on the doors and they shall be open unto you. But I have since found out that when you ask something of God, you must come to Him in the right manner. Before you make the request, he who comes to God must come to Him as He is in spirit and in truth, in a respectful manner of an almighty God. And God is holy, God is sacred, God is spirit and truth. God is love. God is not a person and should not be approached in such a manner. If anyone is not willing to come to God as He is, they are unworthy of His presence, nor of a divine response. God knows the heart of all that He created. So when they are ready to approach Him, it is He who opened the doors for His created souls to approach His holy throne. It is He who draws them nearer so the Son may teach them and work with them to help bring them back to Him. Now God cannot nor can He be mocked by mankind as if they had the power to do so. The Creator has only the power that the Creator allows them. God is before all things. In Him is the beginning and the ending, and all are fully known to Him. He is the Alpha and the Omega, and all that lies in between. So when your heart is ready for God, it's Him who knows better than you do. When the heart is ready, then He will draw you near. So in this message, where do we start? Well, let's start with the first item. Start with sin. What is sin and why is it so fundamental to God? Simply put, sin is an offense against the righteous requirements of God. The Creator made mankind in His image and likeness to be like in Him, and such are the standards man is to live by. So people would say, How are we to be like God? God is not a person. God is not a being as we know to be beings. God is spirit. We are to be like God in our character, in our means, in our ways. So this whole item of sin, I think we need to address before we go forward. When God created man in the beginning, Adam, he formed him out of the dark clay of African soil, molded and shaped it into the form of a man. Then he blew the breath of life into man, and he became a living being. The blood started flowing through his veins. His heart began to pump, and he began to breathe. He was a living being. One thing to notice, Adam had no earthly father. His father was the Spirit of God. Eve had no earthly father. Her father was the Spirit of God. In them was the blood of God. And we know Christ, Lord, was with God in the beginning. God had put them in this lovely garden, a place where He had them to live. And He told them a commandment. He said, "You may partake of anything in this garden, but do not partake from the tree of good and evil, for surely when you do so, you surely shall die." And that's in, I think, Genesis 2:16 and 17. Of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. But because of the temptations of the tempter, which we know as the devil, they were deceived. He tricked them, and they disobeyed God. The moment they disobeyed God is when sin entered into the world. And since they were the original ones, the parent of us all, mankind, that sin in their blood was carried down through all subsequent generations of mankind. So all sin and fall short of the glory of God. However, that was not the end to the story. God had a plan back then. He is a loving and merciful Father. He had a plan for mankind. This was no trick to God. This was no surprise to God. He knew what would happen because he had already seen the ending to the story at the beginning. So where does that lead us with this sin stuff that we apparently are stuck with? Because it's in our blood. It's in our nature. Obviously, Adam and Eve were banished from this lovely garden because they had to disobey God, and now there were certain curses upon them. Man would now have to work by the sweat of his brow to support themselves. Eve would have experienced childbirth and pain for her disobedience. But that was not the end of the story. That was only the beginning. And I think it's now a good time to close this down because I don't want to keep your attention too much longer. I'm going to divide this into part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is a sanctification part of the process.